Well, the headlines are filled with wickedness in the realm of sex trafficking, whether that's Jeffrey Epstein and all those things going on nationally. But right here in Alabama, a group of men was just arrested because they were having people pay to go into this underground den where they would have sex with children. Disgusting. Well, today I'm bringing on my friend Angelo Fermo, who is a retired special agent in the Department of Homeland Security. He used to deal with these things in his professional career. He's coming on to talk about that as well as tell us his story. All that coming up on 1819 News, the podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. We have a great, exciting episode for you today, bringing on a very good friend of mine, Angelo Fermo from Lower Alabama. He made the long pilgrimage from down in Daphne all the way up here to Birmingham, probably about a 4-hour drive, if I had to guess, 3.5, something like that, all to come up here and join me in the studio. And we're just going to tell stories. I love to tell stories. Angelo is a retired Homeland Security special agent. He worked in immigration. He was in a drug task force and undercover operations, taking down cartels and all kinds of really exciting stuff. And he came over to my house a little while ago. He's been on the podcast before, but he was like using his cell phone and didn't really feel like we got the full story and all of the other stories because of that. And I said, why don't you come in the studio next time you're in town? And so we finally got around to doing that. So that's what we're doing today. So some of the stuff you may have heard before, some of it you may not have, but I wanted to bring him into the studio and talk and hear from him, to hear his story about how he got to where he is now, living in Alabama, doing the things he's doing. And it's just really his personal story with his dad and stuff like that we'll get into is, it's very heartwarming. But then, there's something about, they're literally called war stories, okay? Like when you talk to a military guy, like when you had Troy Carrico on and comes in and he talks about his time at war, there's just something engaging about people who do, I guess they call it martial in the sense of, fighting or militaristic or law enforcement or whatever. They have crazy stories and to listen to their war stories is extremely entertaining. And Angelo came up to my house in Wetumpka one day, which is a whole nother story. He was going to buy a sink, and the sink he was buying is right by my house. We'll get into that. But he stopped by, and we cut a cigar. We each cut a cigar and smoked a cigar on my front porch, and we just started talking. A mutual friend introduced us, and so he just came over, and hearing his story and then my story, we've just really hit it off from there and become very good friends. And so want to bring him on to tell his story and talk about some of the things that are going on kind of in our nation with the immigration front and kind of get his perspective on that. And then really just have a meaningful conversation and allow you guys to be part of it. So Angelo Fermo, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on, Bryan. It's great to be here, actually in studio.
Actually in studio this time, not messing with the cell phone. All right. What is the drive from Daphne to Birmingham? Is it 4 hours? Is it 3.5?
It's about 4 because, it doesn't matter whenever you come to Birmingham. They've been working on this one section of highway for like 20 years. They're never going to fix. So you're always going to hit traffic coming to Birmingham.
No, it's to make us think that they're working and that our tax dollars are at work. It's like, look at that construction.
One spot. Man. They've been doing it for
they're getting after it.
10 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
now it's about 4 hours drive.
Yeah. Brutal. I am centrally located right in the middle of the state. In Wetumpka, and if you look at the map, it's literally right in the middle, and so it's 3 hours, down to kind of the Orange Beach area, about 2:45 to Daphne, but about 3 hours down to Fairhope, getting down towards Orange Beach. So you're about 3 hours from the southernmost part of the state. I'm about 3 hours from Huntsville.
Well, you're in the good spot.
Yeah, I'm right. So it doesn't matter which way I go. I can only drive 3 hours without going into the ocean, which I don't recommend, or going into Tennessee, which I recommend a little bit more than going into the ocean.
But you do drive the road a lot. That's why I bought you that trucker's hat that time.
You did. That is it. I need to, now that I actually got a truck instead of a little Hyundai. I've got a truck now, and so I need to start hauling freight. So maybe if you can hook me up with some people that need stuff brought back and forth.
You wouldn't want to meet the people that I know that haul freight.
That's right. I might have already met them. They actually might be old friends of mine.
Look, I had a buddy of mine the other day. He just came through last Tuesday. We used to work narcotics together out in Texas. He bought his kid a truck in Atlanta. So he's flying in, picking up the truck, and he's driving back. And he's a Hispanic, third or fourth generation. He's a funny guy, love him to death. He's like, yeah, I'm flying in Atlanta. I'm going to get this truck, and I'm going to drive it back. And I was like, so you're not bringing any luggage? And you're going to have one key on the keychain. I said, you're not making it through Alabama. You're going to get interdicted everywhere. They're going to think that's a load vehicle. They're going to drill your car looking for money. I said, you're not making it back to Texas. And he's like, you're so right. I should bring luggage. And I was like, yeah. They're going to get you.
Oh, my goodness. Good times. So, again, another great, funny story. But the funny story of how you and I met, we have a mutual friend that's like, hey, you guys got to meet. We kept texting. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be down there. And you're like, I'm not going to be here. And you're like, I'm going to be up there. And I wasn't there. And then finally, you're like, where do you live? And I was like, I live in Wetumpka. He goes, that's crazy. He's like doing a remodel at his house or something. And he needs to get a sink. And he's like, my wife is sending me to buy a sink. And the sink is like 5 minutes from your house.
It was literally like right a mile or two away, which was crazy. Yeah. And she wanted these antique sinks, and it's so hard to match two antique sinks from like the 30s. Yeah. And the only where I could find one was some guy had it in Wetumpka, and
a mile from my house.
And I said, let me look this up. Oh, well, wait a minute, you're right around the corner.
Yeah, yep. So that was cool, and it was kind of it was an interesting time. The Bubba Copeland stuff had just happened.
Yes, you were putting
and that was kind of where the storytelling began. We were getting security cameras put up, and you're like, what's up? And I'm like, well, remember the guy that just killed himself? That was probably abusing children. And you're like, oh yeah. And you jumped right in and you're like, I knew that dude was a pedophile. This is conjecture. But in his professional opinion, he was suspicious that he might have been a pedophile. How's that? Is that better? I get it. I don't like getting sued. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And you were like,
well, let me tell you some stories.
Yeah. So that was part of what you did with that was in the sex trafficking realm. And so the big ticket items that everyone wants to know about and thinks about when it comes to law enforcement right now, immigration, sex trafficking, and drug trafficking. Like those are the three big things. And those are the three things that you did.
Yeah, I was fortunate that when in Homeland Security, HSI, you're able to work a lot of different areas of angles. If you're in the larger cities, you really get put in a squad, so you really can't, whatever unit you get put in, you're stuck in. When I was in Texas, I went straight into the drug unit.
Yeah.
Well, not straight in. When I first got there, it was right after 9/11, so we were still working a little bit of terrorist operations and stuff. And they thought the world was coming to an end back then, so they had us following everybody and stuff. And then eventually the Bureau kind of took all their people out and started putting them in anti-terrorist operations, and it left this void. It literally overnight, all the FBI units that I saw in San Antonio where I was at were pulled out of DEA and sent back to the main office to work terrorist operations. And we were customs agents at the time. And so they basically, we were working drugs, but not to the level that we got started at that point. And then we just started setting up drug units and operations with DEA there locally. And then it just kind of took off from there. And that's where to be honest with you, that's where I got good at tapping phones. I love tapping phones. You get everybody's dirt. You're seeing who's cheating on who's doing what. Somebody's stealing from somebody.
Like a country song.
Oh, it's great. But that back then, nobody was tapping phones like that. And so people were scared of it because when you tap a phone back then, it takes like a 30 to 40 page document that you got to write. And look, I am not a good writer, but I was like, I'm going to do this because if I can tap phones, I can dismantle an entire organization as opposed to just picking off people here and there. Yeah. And so I got really good at tapping people's phones, and I enjoyed it. You get some great stories out of it. You can do things on the wire that you're doing. So you're on the phone, and like if it's called tickling the wire, trickling it or whatever, and you're sitting there and you're like, no activity's going on. Well, you can go knock down a drug dealer or something to get them to start talking about it, because the more criminal stuff they talk about, the more people you can indict in the conspiracy. Greatest law we ever created was a conspiracy. Wow. I was in court one time and I had same thing, tapped a wire. I had 10 people sitting in court. And the judge at the initial appearance goes, does anybody have any questions? And this one guy raises his hand. He goes, excuse me, Your Honor, I think you have the wrong person. And he's like, explain to me why. And he goes, because I've never met these 9 people. And he goes, the judge looked at the warrant. He goes, oh, you don't know what conspiracy is.
Yeah.
You sold something that affected every one of these people in the room. And so now you're facing a 10 to 20 year charge for cocaine trafficking.
It's crazy because I'm hearing what you're saying through the ears of someone who hates the federal government and, watch the FBI, arresting people that were protesting pro-life organizations. So I'm hearing what you were doing something that was good and patriotic and right, but then that type of stuff was taken and then it was turned on the people, which kind of is how your law enforcement career ended. And I don't want to get away. There's one more thing I want to talk about. I want to go back and hear how you were able to identify Bubba Copeland just based off of very little information that he was probably a pedophile, but we're going to get back to that. So tell how your law enforcement kind of career came to an end, where you came in and then it went from tracking terrorists, tracking cartels, to tracking parents at school board meetings?
Yeah, it kind of crazy. People, look, I can tell these are my stories inside the bubble. Maybe you lived in another city and it was different for different people. I can only talk to what I witnessed. And so Biden comes in day one, and right off the bat, we get an email. It's like, well, first of all, we get an email that's, if you know of anyone that is an insurgent into the government, please report them to this hotline. And basically, if you're conservative Republican, report it to the thing. I thought that everybody in my office went out and got liability insurance because they were scared that the government wouldn't protect you anymore as a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Then they came out with another memo that at some point we couldn't. An illegal alien is part of the law.
Yeah.
We couldn't refer to them as illegal aliens anymore. It was some silly they came up with, like undocumented citizens.
Yeah.
And they made you put that in all the stuff. I remember I went and bought a gun one day, and I'm in the firearms store and they give me the documents and it says, are you something illegal alien? I was like, I can't sign this ATF form. I said, we've changed that to non-U.S. citizen. Yeah. And the gun store owner laughed, but they changed that. I saw that occur. And then later on, they came out with this silly idea. I do have a picture of it if anybody ever wants to dispute it, because I was like, no one will ever believe this. But they put countdown clocks on all our computers because, when they were switched over to everybody has to get the COVID shot. And again, I don't care if you want to take it, you go right ahead, but it should be your choice. Yeah. And they were forcing people to do it. And they put these silly countdown clocks, and all our computers are connected globally. So it doesn't matter if I'm sitting in D.C. or Japan or in Mobile, Alabama. When you log on, you see the same intro banner. So when you log on, your first intro banner, there's a countdown clock in the right corner that was counting down the hours and minutes and seconds until, if you didn't get that shot, you were supposed to start termination proceedings on these employees. And I remember saying, I was like, well, this is kind of, hard to deal with as a manager, because I had 2 employees and there was a third in the office that didn't want to take the shot. And how do you convince them, hey, here's a warrant, go hit a pedophile's house over in, this part of Baldwin County. And they're looking at you going, well, the clock says you're firing me in 26 days, 20 hours, and 3 seconds. Yeah. Why would I go put my life on the line for the community when your officers are terminating me? And so that was kind of crazy to see all that occur. And that was just in his first year. Yeah. And I remember I was retiring. So, I know how the system works. I'm pretty good at playing chess, not chewing on my checker chips. I'm playing chess. And I sent an email to my guys that didn't want to take the COVID shot. And I said, as your manager, it's been an honor to work for you. You don't have to take the COVID shot. Use this in your lawsuit one day. Because then they could say, well, my manager told me not to take it. I'm just doing what my manager told me. So I was like, peace out. Yeah.
When the adage of I'm just doing my job and I'm just following orders actually works. I love it. That's good. So let's go back to that first conversation. We're on the front porch. I'm getting security cameras put in. And just to remind anyone, in case anyone was living under a rock, Bubba Copeland was the pastor of First Baptist Church, Phoenix City, who was the mayor in Smith Station. And he was living a double life as an online trans porn star. He was creating memes where he was basically encouraging children to transition their gender. He was writing homoerotic slasher fiction talking about killing women in his community so that he would stalk them and mimic their every move, so that he could kill her and transition her identity to have sex with her husband, a real woman who actually lived in his community that was friends with his wife. Just bizarro world stuff. I had a pretty strong inclination from, someone who has just a normal worldview on how human depravity and seeing things. I was also very suspicious based off of some of the homoerotic slasher fiction that I had to read that he was probably targeting children or underage people. I had that same sneaking suspicion. We couldn't write about it because we didn't have proof, though afterwards a lot of people reached out that did not want to go on record that made my suspicions stronger, we'll say,
Right.
that I can say. So this is all going on, and Bubba Copeland, we write those stories. He initially denies it, and then they go to do a wellness check on him. He gets in a chase with the cops, gets out of his car after the chase, waving his pistol around, puts a gun to his head, shoots himself. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the Daily Beast, I mean, you name it, all these massive, the biggest media outlets in the world, blame me and Craig and Jeff, Craig, the reporter that did it, Jeff, the editor, and then me, the CEO. Blood is on your hands, Bryan Dawson. Blood is on your hands, Craig Monger. Blood is on your hands, 1819 News. We get blamed for it. And so now we're getting all these crazy death threats, people putting pictures of my kids, Craig kids, Jeff's kids, all of our family pictures with their home addresses underneath, talking about killing our kids. And so, and that was right in the middle of when you came over, and I was getting security cameras put in. And you're like, why are you getting security cameras put in? I'm like, well, did you see that story? He goes, oh, yeah, that dude was for sure a pedophile. And I was like, okay, do tell. And you talked a little bit about your work in that realm with pastors and priests and...
Yeah. So when I heard that story, it's a pattern. You can almost see it, you can, I've never really worked in that field until probably 2011 or something like that. I'd never dealt with any, I wanted to stay away from it, to be honest with you. I just, cause guns and, dealing gun, I mean, like being a gun smuggler and all that stuff and, undercover operations, that's the cool area. So I kind of had stayed away from doing the pedophiles and stuff. And then it was a kind of a weird situation where, I'd ran some operations with them before, search warrants with some other guys, but I'd never seen, done it myself. And there was a situation in Mobile County where someone had come to me and nobody was taking the case seriously because it was internationally. And it just, leaving some of all the details out. Basically what it was there was a child, I say child, he's probably about 17 at the time. He had come to one of these farming families that were out in this area in Mobile, and he goes to him and he's like, hey, I got this video and stuff because some of the kids came to me in this orphanage that we have for the church down south, and I don't know if it's right, because he had grown up in a sheltered life. And so he shows this stuff to these farmers, and as soon as they saw it, they're like, oh, we got to go to the police right away. So they take him over to the police, they take the video, he shows it, and of course the problem was it was outside of the United States, so, they didn't have anybody to look to it, and so it was kind of dying. And they came to me and said, hey, would you work this case? And I was like, I've never worked one of these before. I've never wanted to work one. Yeah. But I felt like nobody was going to do it, so I started putting it together, and I saw from the first time, you see some evil in the world. I mean, when you're dealing with cartels and stuff and those kind of people or international arms dealers, it's business. If people get killed, they choose to do it. It's just the cost of doing business. It's like the mafia, you choose to get into that world, or you choose to get into that. But in that sense, you saw someone preying on children, and that's a whole nother level of evil.
That is an interesting distinction you just made that I have never thought about. People who are involved in crime have made a conscious decision to enter, and I used to be that guy, right?
Right.
I made a conscious decision to enter into a lifestyle, and had I gotten killed, or the people that even I hurt that I went to prison for, we all made the decision to be involved in that lifestyle. We were making decisions to commit crimes. We were cognizantly committing felonies, and entering into a lifestyle that we knew that you're either going to end up dead or in jail. Those are the only options in that lifestyle, and that, and you make that you make that decision. But these children who are being preyed on did not make that decision.
No. And that's when you see, I told somebody one time, I said, I actually was keeping count at one point. I had to put over several hundred people in Club Fed, and I was proud of it. I knew the number exactly, and I was like, I wanted to put as many people in jail as possible. And as many drug dealers and cartel people that we arrested and sent to prison, it's just a system. You're going to put the next one in, and then somebody's going to move up and take the place and stuff. But at least in a situation where you remove a pedophile off the street or someone trafficking on these children, you've actually removed a bad actor, because they're not going to stop. They're going to continue to abuse. And like we've said, the problem is when they commit abuses, sometimes that person they abuse, they don't see, because you see the pattern. They think that that's the only normal way that they can then interact emotionally, is because that's how they were abused. And not to say it's that way all the time, but you see a pattern coming to life. And so when that situation is, I had to get the evidence. So I called up to Washington. They sent a team with me. It was pretty cool, actually. It's as far as my going into South. We were going into, down south in a foreign country. And so they sent a team with me, and I had 2 forensic interviewers and a couple translators. And then I think it was a team of about 8. But we go into country, and we all have bulletproof vehicles. Each vehicle has 2 officers in each one, 2 state police officers, and all of them have machine guns. And so we had to go way up in this village. And so we get up in this village and we start interviewing these children. And we interviewed a ton of children, ages from 6 to 16. And it was very troubling because you would see kids I remember the 16-year-old, or he was 15 or 16, he broke down in the middle of the interview and he was just like, I'm not gay. I didn't want to be like this. I was raped, and just bawling his eyes out. And you see this and you hear these stories from these kids and you're like, someone just came down and just ripped every little bit of shred of your life out. You're never going to be who you were before this occurred. And so we were like, yeah, you know what? People need to go to jail for this. And the country that we were dealing with, they were doing a decent job. They were getting arrest warrants and stuff for the person that had committed it. They shut the orphanage down and stuff. But, we come back to the United States and you see people try to hide stuff, and it's crazy. People will turn a blind eye to that type of situation. And so, we the father of the young man that went and did all this down south, he was trying to actually hide the fact of what his son had done. Yeah, I mean, as crazy as it is, he was trying to hide it. And we had gotten word through some of the family members that out there on the farm that they had an area that they were destroying equipment and computer stuff that were related to it to hide the evidence. And because you had family members that were coming forward telling us, hey, look, this is going on and this is where they're trying to hide it. So, I got some of the officers that we were talking about where the location of the house was, and one farmer had lived down the street from where we got the search warrant for the property. So, but when we were talking to one of the farmers down the street, and he's like, yeah, I know that farm you guys are going to. They're really racist down there. And again, I don't know if this is true, but the other farmer said they were, flying, racist flags and stuff like this. So what I did, because I'm like, hey, if you're going to, try to cover up the molestation of children, I'm going to really stick it to you. So I went to some of my officers in the office and I said, hey, there's this guy over here that's racist. And I was the only white officer, and I took every other black officer, and we went out there and just destroyed their property. I mean, we searched it up and down. And I was like, you want to be racist? Okay, well, I'm coming with all my buddies and we're going to teach you how to violate children, and everybody was like, I'm down with this, Angelo. Let's go out there and, and show them, that they shouldn't be doing this. And we went out there, got the evidence, and then charged the father and prosecuted him in federal court and stuff like that. And I'm in federal court one day, and there was a whole ton of them show up, and it was the craziest thing. We're downstairs in the lobby, and me and another officer are sitting there, and it goes to show you people's mentality. I see the world as right and wrong. You break the law, you go to jail. It's that simple. There is no gray area where we're going to let this just slide. I mean,
specifically in that realm, all realms, 100%. If you break the law, you need justice has to be done. But that's like a whole other level.
That's another level, yes. And so we're sitting there in the court, and somebody comes up to me and is like, I can't believe you would do this. How can you prosecute these cases? And I was like, because I went down there and I interviewed the children and I watched them cry to me. I said, I wish we could charge more. And I'll never forget, the person goes, well, I don't even see what the big deal is. It's just a bunch of brown children. This is horrible. And I was like, you need to be arrested too. You know what I'm saying? Because if this is your thought process and you think this is okay, I mean, it was just crazy. And I saw that occur. And then when I moved into management later on, I was fortunate enough to take over the child predator group. And I had 2 amazing ladies that worked for me. I mean, they were lights out. I could send them anywhere. They could do, amazing. I mean, they could break somebody like that. They'd go in and interview these perpetrators that had abused children and break them. And I had a good team. I had some good task force officers. Had a great friend of mine, still to this day. He was down in Foley. He calls me one day and he goes, hey, you need to come down here. We got a very serious situation. So we go down to Foley and we get in there, and the officers, they did an amazing job. They had gotten word that a lady was trying to sell her 2-year-old son to a pedophile. And it was going down. Like, it was happening. He was in the process of buying it. The guy had a wife. She gets freaked out, and goes and calls the police department and says, hey, look, he's trying to sell this child, and I think the deal's supposed to happen because he was going to sexually abuse this 2-year-old child. And so we go and snatch him up, and the officers down at Foley were amazing. I mean, they did an amazing job on their interview operations, and we're sitting behind the screen. We can see everything going on, and they break him. He admits to trying to buy the child, and the wife, we were like, she's involved. We thought she was involved, and so we're going to bring her back in to try to get, bring her into the whole conspiracy. We thought at some point she had gotten cold feet about the sale, and she was adamantly. Now this is it's a horrible situation, but it's kind of wild and crazy that you see what goes on in the law enforcement realm of their day-to-day lives. And so we're in there and they're interviewing her. And the officer goes, "Hey, can I look at your phone just to make sure you're telling the truth?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm telling y'all the truth. Here's my phone. You can see it." So they go to look at her phone and she goes, "Hold on. I forgot to tell you something." We're thinking, oh, this is when she's supposed to tell us the scoop that she's involved in this transaction. She goes, "Well, no, there's nothing on there about me trying to sell this child." She goes, "I just want you to know that I might have had some type of sexual encounter with our dog Tito." And I was like, "Oh, wow."
Gotta go get Tito now.
I was like, now we got to go save Tito.
Go kick in the door and get Tito.
Tito, the dog's being sexually abused too. I was like, everything's getting abused around here. And so she's got this thing and she's like, "Yeah, are we going to be done here? Because I got to go. I work at this restaurant, and I'm the chef over there at this restaurant." And immediately I was like texting home going, "We're not ever eating at this place again. Take this off the menu." Telling all my friends, "I can't tell you what's going on, but don't go eat at this restaurant."
Do not eat there.
So, yeah.
That is sick people. On that note, in more recent, there's this Bibb County thing. Have you been paying attention to this?
Yes, I have a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, I have a hard time even reading the stories, but it basically sounds like there was some type of a drug sex trafficking, really just sex trafficking ring underground. I mean, basically, a lot of the times when you start to read about a sex trafficking story or whatever, it's a 14 or 15-year-old girl who started going into prostitution. And the modern way of thinking about things is that if you're under 18, you can't actually be a prostitute. It means that you're being taken advantage of. And I agree with that. An underage girl who's being pimped, essentially. That's the bulk of when you hear about sex trafficking. That's usually what they're talking about. My daughter was trafficked, whatever was trafficked. It's a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girl or whatever who has been drugged and is prostituted out, and that's wicked and it's horrendous, and those people need to be killed as well. But every once in a while, one of these situations, some of the stuff that you were talking about just now, or this one in the Bibb County situation, where it is small children basically being held against their will and people charging grown men to go have sex with these essentially babies. And it is just outrageous. What are your thoughts when you kind of saw that with your background and experience?
I wasn't shocked because I've seen it before. It's to me, you can't even wrap your brain around how they even think that that's okay. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to people. And I don't think it makes sense in any world. Like, to me, when I hear that, I'm like, those people need to put under the jail. They never need to be able to come out.
They need to die.
Yes. They don't.
I mean, that's just flat out. They need to be executed.
I mean, that's horrible what they're doing. I mean, we had a lady in Mobile in 2007 or 8. She was selling her 2 little daughters they were like 10 years old, 9 years old. I can't remember the range, but they were young. Yeah. And she was selling them to the local migrant workers around there. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, at what point is this in your head that you're thinking this is normal? Same thing with Bibb County. You're like, well, why is this? It's hard to wrap your brain around. You just muddle through the evil, try to remove them from the scene. I mean, and you're going to, those kids are, going to be messed up for years to come. They're left for their life. They're always going to deal with trauma from this. And even as they get older, there's going to be more and more trauma as they get older. You see a lot of them turn to drugs and stuff because they have trouble coping with it. And it's sad. And it's just like you said, it's the most evil of humanity that there is. And it's funny, like when we were doing some of the children rescue operations overseas, we were at this table and one of the pastors is there at the thing. And I'm sitting at a table with a Navy SEAL and some Air Force gentlemen and stuff like this. And we go around the table and, asking everybody how they feel about it. And I just remember they get to me and I'm like, yeah, we did amazing job. And they're like, well, how does that, make you feel emotionally? And I was like, to be honest with you, my emotional wall was put up years ago, and it's just there because you have to remove yourself emotionally from the work you do because you have a job to do. In your job, and that's with every law enforcement officer in the state of Alabama dealing with this, they have to shut the emotions off. They have to get the evidence, and they have to get the prosecution. I mean, there are times where it is tough. I've had our forensic, people that go through this stuff. They have to take breaks from that. I used to rotate them because looking at that so long, it messes with your mind a little bit, and it makes you just where you have to put up a wall or you can't get through it.
Yeah, I can't imagine. A couple places I want to go. One, I want to really emphasize the fact Matt Simpson down in your neck of the woods had put up a piece of legislation that would allow us to execute pedophiles. I think you're going to see a lot more bills like that dropped. I think Matt's already pre-filed that one for that to get through, and whoever else passed whatever bill. Like, to me, and it doesn't need to be 35 years after his 17 appeals, and it's like, no, this person needs to be swinging from a rope in public as fast as possible once he's convicted and had his trial. If there's not some form of justice that is executed on these people, and again, I look at things through a biblical lens. The Bible says the state doesn't bear the power of the sword in vain, and the purpose of the sword is to execute justice on the wicked. There's nothing more heinous, there's nothing more wicked than this Bibb County situation and these situations that you described. And if we don't execute justice swiftly on them, we're basically, the government is saying that it's okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look.
That's a slap on the wrist to let someone sit in prison for 35 years and then get, death by some lethal injection in a basement somewhere with 6 people watching.
You used to hope when we would put them in there that a lot of times that
they'd get killed in
prison.
They'd
get prison justice would deal with it. Because a lot of times it does. Like, I remember one time we picked up a guy in Baldwin County. Now, he hadn't went hands-on yet as an offender, but I served the warrant for a friend of mine who was out of town, and I'll never forget, I picked him up, take him to the jail, drop him off, and then I had to go back and pick him up in a few weeks to move him to the federal court. And within that time of like 2 to 3 weeks, I come to pick him back up, and we go to put him in the transport unit, and he's got a patch over his eye. And I was like, oh, my Lord, why have you got a patch over his eye? And he was all mad. He's like, I'm writing the judge when I get out of here or whatever. And I was like, what happened to your eye? And he goes, oh, they held me down and put a pencil in my eye. And I was thinking, well, you know what? That was justice deserved.
Glad that's all they put in you.
Yeah, exactly. But
for being honest.
Yeah, but like, it's one of those things where I think you're going to see tougher penalties because if they get out, they can't help
every time. Yeah, no one has come back from that. So I think we need to see legislation. I've got some funny prison justice stories on that from being in prison and seeing it from that end. I've watched, there was a rule that pedophiles don't get to lift weights because they don't want pedophiles getting stronger and going out and snatching up more kids, right? Like, that's a real thing. And so I had this dude that I was in there with, and anytime the pedophiles would get on the weight, he would just go smack them around and knock the weights out of their hand and run them off the weight pile. Obviously way worse stuff happened to people in there, but the worst situation that I saw was these 2 young white boys were in there, and they were like trying to like earn their stripes or whatever. And there was a much larger guy who was a full-blown pedophile, and they went in there to like give him prison justice, and he ended up just beating the hell out of him. And I was like, bro, that's horrible. Like,
how do you come back from that?
There's no coming back from that. Like, what happened to your face? Like, nothing. But no, I do, and I think whatever form of justice, but I think vigilante justice in that situation, I believe, is justified. There's the video of the guy that was in the airport back in the 80s, where his child was sexually abused, and he was on the payphone waiting with the news cameras and everything, and the guy that raped his kid was walking, and he pulls out a gun. He puts down the payphone and pulls out the gun. You remember he had the sunglasses. You haven't seen this? Oh my gosh,
I'll have to go watch this one.
Yeah,
if I saw it, I probably forgot.
So it's his dad, and his son was molested by this guy, and the dude who did the molesting was in cuffs, and it was like this very public thing.
I hope he got off, the father.
Yeah, I think he did.
He should have, yeah.
And so the guy who molested his kid is all smug, and all the cameras are on him, and he's handcuffed, and little does he know that the dad is over here. And so they're like bringing him through an airport or something. And the dad's on the payphone back in the 80s when they had payphones. And he's got like this Chicago Bears hat and these big aviator glasses so you can't see who he is. And like it's all caught on camera. And he hangs up the phone and turns around and pulls his gun out and just shoots the dude. And everything was like, this is amazing. It's horrible that his kid got molested, but like that. And the reason that happens is because we don't believe our justice system is going to take care of this stuff.
No, it's not.
So anyway, I could rattle on about this forever.
It's just like you said, they'll go to jail and they'll sit there and just keep doing appeal after appeal after appeal.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be BRYAN, Brian.Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you.
I watched one not too long ago. I think it was out of Florida. It was that pushed the pedophile laws through pretty much most of the states. But, again, a convicted pedophile right down the street from this father's house. He had left where he's supposed to be because you're supposed to stay within your area where you're, and report. Well, he had moved in with his sister and then, kidnaps the little girl, kills her, rapes her, and then, rapes her and kills her. And, again, had you hadn't dealt with this situation early, that little girl would have been alive. Yeah.
The state owes a tremendous amount of restitution to that family.
And we were busy, COVID really brought it out because everybody was locked inside. And then they all went online and they couldn't help themselves. So, we as the government have ways to see when they start hitting these, especially they'll start hitting certain servers and stuff where they're just downloading these child porn stuff, and trading pictures with each other. And there's a whole little underground network of sickos out there. But, I want to debunk the idea that it's just some guy that's hiding in the shadows. We've arrested everybody from the poorest person you can imagine all the way to, I wasn't involved in this one, but some of my friends have arrested a U.S. attorney that was down around this area, not in Alabama, but another state nearby, that was trying to fly to Chicago at one point to have sex with a child. And so it's every aspect of life that you have these people that just can't conform to the normal society and for whatever reason.
And oftentimes it's because they were molested when they were kids. That's worth throwing out there. It doesn't justify it and either way. But one of the things that when we had our very first conversation on my front porch when this topic came up, specifically about Bubba Copeland, because he was a pastor, you talked about there being – I don't know that I'd say it's disproportionate, but it's a really interesting thing because there's something about like when a doctor puts on a white coat and the doctor walks in with his stethoscope around his neck and he has the white coat and he comes in and he's like, Mr. Fermo, I need you to take your pants down. I need to take a look at, put this shot in your butt or whatever. And you're like, okay.
Yep. No problem.
Because he's got the white coat on, he's got the stethoscope and he's the doctor. Right. And so something happens to us subconsciously when we come into the presence of an expert or a professional that you trust, right? It's this idea of trust that you automatically defer because the person's in the uniform,
right? Meeting
all of the, the psychological, framings to where, oh, that's what this person is. This is what they do. And so it's okay to do this thing I would never do with anybody else. Right. It's how our brains work. And so these guys get into these positions of trust, which is, the way that the laws against this stuff are written. And pastors, man, these pastors get in there and parents are like, oh, he's a man of the cloth. He's fine. He's a pastor. He can watch my kids. What are some of the things you kind of saw there?
You saw some, I've seen a lot of people within the church, not to call out any single entity. I had a friend of mine one time, true story, they're doing a search warrant on this church in the South. And he calls me, he's like, you're not going to believe this. He goes, we're over here tearing this church apart for money laundering because the church leader was involved in some money laundering that was going to Mexico. So that's what they hit it for. But he gets in there, and so he opens one of the doors in a closet, and there's a file cabinet with a lock on it. He goes, hey, we're going to need to open this file cabinet. So they open the file cabinet. As soon as they pull out, it's lawsuits that are being settled for molestation. And so my buddy says he opens the thing, and he's reading. He's like, wow. He goes, man, y'all settled these lawsuits for He goes, well, I'm going to have to report this up to the U.S. Attorney's Office. He goes, man, this guy's got the same name. He goes, wait a minute, this is you. and he realized that guy was the pastor that had been molesting the children. So they had to step out, get another search warrant, and come back. So you see that within the church. Another situation we had in Saraland one time, I think it was Saraland or right around Saraland, we went to a church, and it was crazy. To this day, it still boggles me. It blows my mind. We go to this guy's house. He was in a wheelchair anyway because he was handicapped. And we caught him at 3 houses down. And to this day, it was kind of ironic. We had to follow him to his house in his wheelchair, and there's a line of federal cars behind him as he's getting to it looks like a chase, in his wheelchair to get to
worse than the O.J. Simpson chase.
Yeah, so it's all these cars with their lights, behind the guy in the wheelchair. We get to his house, and we go inside, and he's got this. He was a deacon at a church, and he has one of those old school houses where it goes to like a steeple, A-frame house, and he's got just all these pictures of children on the wall. And I was like, wow, I never forget. He's sitting in his chair. I go, you got a lot of children you got a lot of family members. He goes, oh, I don't have any family. And I was like, well, who are all these people? And he's like, oh, they're kids and families at the church. And I was like, okay. So we start searching his house, and he had a teddy bear set up in the bathroom with a video camera that he would invite all the other girls from the church over, and he'd let them, shower in the room. And then he had it secretly recorded into a room. And in his bedroom, he had the old school bedroom where he had 2 different closets. And in one side of the closet was his clothes. And on the other side, he had his recording equipment where he was recording the young girls from the church. And then he had a whole shrine in there where he was praying to Jesus and for his sins of recording the thing, and I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that, buddy. Yeah. I'm sorry. You don't get to do what you're doing over here, evil against the children, and then go in this little closet and pray to God for your sins and everything's forgiven and right with the world. Yeah. They charged him, and he went to prison. But you see it in the church, and you see it in those things. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I think like me and some of my colleagues that we work together, as you see so much of that, you get really protective of your children. Like I can tell this now because she's gone, but I had one of my employees today, she calls me, she goes, you're probably getting a call on me today. And I was like, because she lived in a nice neighborhood, and she goes, yeah, the snow cone guy came through the neighborhood in a little shady vehicle, and it looked like, pedophile van. She went right out there. I mean, she was great. Yeah. She badged him, and she's like, I just want you to know, if you think you're coming through this neighborhood and snatching up any little kids, I will ruin your life. And so she runs him out of the neighborhood. She thought he was going to call and report on her. Yeah. But that's how protective we get of our children.
And it's interesting. And the reason that my relationship with you popped off the way it did is that though on the other side of the law, the similarities that you and I have because of the experiences we've been through. And so I was in prison. One of the first prisons I was in prison with this guy who owned a daycare center and had sex with all the kids in the daycare center. I was in there with a Boy Scout leader who would, molest all the kids in the Boy Scout thing. Like, so once you have seen that, and what was bizarre is the odds of the normal looking person being the child molester, right? Like you go in there and you had a bunch of dudes that are kind of like rough and mean and tattoos and whatever. Those dudes were drug addicts. Those dudes were murderers. Right. Those dudes, maybe they were rapists. But the dude that looked like an accountant, that was the child molester, right? Like the clean cut white guy, that owned a business or whatever and looked completely normal. And how that messed me up is that when I got out of prison and I started having children, I realized, like you said, this sickness doesn't discriminate. It's from the lowest class to the highest class to what, like, anybody's a potential predator. I have 5 daughters, 2 sons, and everyone's a sex offender until proven otherwise, right? Like, right. That's like you start there with the way that we protect our kids. And I think more parents need to think that way.
Oh, 100%.
Right? The level of trust they give to other people with their kids. Like, my kids don't go stay the night at people's houses. Like, it was just, we just don't do that, and it's because of the things that I've seen.
And you're right. I mean, like you said, you hit on something. I remember a friend of mine arrested one of the Boy Scout pack leaders one time, and up until court, they all stood behind him. And so I had to help my friend transport some prisoners down there, and we're going to the courtroom. And I remember walking by the door into the courtroom. Courtroom's packed. They had brought the entire Boy Scout troop there, coming to defend him because he was telling the Boy Scouts, oh, no, I don't do all this. I don't look at this. And then I couldn't even imagine what the shock was to probably all the other Cub Scout or Boy Scout leaders when they were in there and heard actually what the charges were. Now, he hadn't molested any of the children in the pack, but what he was doing was downloading tons of pornography, of child pornography on the thing, and that's how we got him. But you see it in all walks of life, and I'm with you. You got to be protective of your children. I tell your listeners out there that are listening to it, just don't be willy-nilly with it and be like, oh, well, that's so-and-so. He goes to church and he's good. And I personally am the same way you are.
Yeah.
I look at it, I'm protective of my children because once that happens, there's no turning back.
Yeah.
You can't undo that.
Yeah. No one doing it. And I got so many things I want to talk to you about. We're just going to do an extended long form. We're going Joe Rogan. Hopefully my producer's okay with that. He can buzz me if not. I had a friend who was in law enforcement in California who worked the same. He was, I think, at the state level. I don't know if he was like, if it was like a state trooper, if he was municipal. I don't remember. Great guy. And he would tell me, he was in the sex crimes unit, and he would tell me, I don't know if this is just California, if this is everywhere, about half of the scenes that they would go to, there was weird, like ritualistic things, like, kind of occult practices that were tied to a lot of the sexual, weirdness or whatever. It wasn't just, guys that were, having sex with kids or whatever. There was like an occult side of it, like with weird sacrifices and rituals. Did you ever come across anything like that?
I was working a case one time with the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office, and we executed a warrant on a house. It was their warrant. A lot of times we will go out with their warrants, and if we got a great relationship, which we did with Baldwin County, we can then elevate it to federal, because you want to take it federal because we want as much time placed on this person as possible. So a lot of times we'll just work together with I'll never forget, we hit this house in Baldwin County, and it was bizarre. We get in there, and the whole house was like, they had like Harry Potter outfits, and one of the rooms was like they were making Harry Potter clothing and stuff. And I'm like, this is so odd. And these are grown men, that were making these items. And we ended up arresting one of the individuals. Come to find out, I didn't go back on this one, but then they saw activity again at the house, and they're like, well, wait a minute, we got the one guy in jail. He was also downloading child porn too. They had to go back and arrest the other one. But yeah, that was kind of weird to see some of that stuff in the house. I was like, what are y'all up in here playing Harry Potter? And you're like in your 30s? So
very weird.
That's the only time I'd ever seen any of that,
Interesting. And I think it makes you wonder, like, you look at California and like, why was it so thick out there? You know what I mean? Like weird satanic, sex rituals, and that was like a huge part of everything that he ran into. Not all of it, he said, but a solid percentage of the scenes where they came in, specifically where there was a death of the child, it was through some weird sacrificial.
I think you get out there to California and look at the lax laws.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. If you allow them to run rampant like that and you don't enforce the laws, I've seen it firsthand in California trying to enforce laws out there. It's ridiculous on the extent. I've had 2 incidences out there where I was like, I couldn't even live in this state. So yeah, I could see it happening out there.
What do you think of all the Epstein stuff?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think 100% they talk about a list. It's not like a list that he probably has, but I guarantee you there's a notebook with all his contacts in that list. And I'm going to say, now, do they not want that list to come out? Because I don't think he was running, this is my opinion.
That's why I asked,
everybody can have their own. I don't think he was running some island where he had all these children and all these rich people. I think there was a lot of prostitution involved in that stuff. And I do think they were we obviously know there was probably some use of some underage women in there, because he probably dealt with a couple weirdos in there that really like to try to go after these children. And he was all up in it too. He loved that. You could tell by the way of the actions and some of the reports and interviews that have come out. But I also think he was providing high-end prostitutes probably to a lot of these business people, or they were involved in some kinky stuff. And I think that list has some pretty high valued people on them. For them to say they don't have a list is BS. He's got a phone. He had a phone. They downloaded that phone. What names are in that phone?
Yeah.
He had a computer. They downloaded that. What names are in those email transactions? They have all that. So that's, to me, when they talk about the Epstein list, that's the list of people.
Sure.
And I would love to see who was in that phone, and I'm sure they don't want that to come out, because you probably have some high-figured people involved. I still, to this day, and I've read a ton of articles, and I know what he did financially, but where did he get most of his wealth from? That's still a mystery.
Knows. That's why I think he was a Mossad agent, is what I think. I think he was working with Mossad. You go back and you look at his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, Mossad agent. You look at where he got his start. Did you know that Bill Barr's dad was the person who gave him his first job at this elite school in New York.
Yes, I knew that. Yeah.
And Bill Barr's dad wrote a book about a giant sex trafficking ring. Like way back in the 70s, he wrote this crazy, weird book about how these aliens on this other planet would put people into sex slavery and run these blackmail operations through these sex slaves. And they were called COSARs. That's like Bill Barr's dad gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job while he was writing this book about this very same thing. And then who was the U.S. or the Attorney General when Epstein got arrested? I'll give you a hint. It was Bill Barr.
It was Bill Barr.
It was Bill Barr. What are the odds of that?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no odds.
You couldn't buy a lottery ticket that would play out that way.
Correct. Yeah. It's not real. So, you hear about that, and then you hear about where my opinion kind of on the youth thing, Jeffrey Epstein himself personally had a preferential, to the younger girls. He liked girls with braces.
Yeah.
Right. That was his thing. And I heard it said, and I think this is very true. Why with that's so weird, that's so bizarre. And what it is in that sickness and that wickedness is a desire to destroy innocence.
Yeah.
Because it's evil.
I mean, he was an evil man. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And then you look at, I still can't get over the fact that he had that painting of Bill Clinton up in his house when they raided the house. That's just odd in itself too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on a whole nother level of weirdness and sickness, but he was definitely, like you said, I still believe he was recording stuff. He was blackmailing people because, I mean, he had too much power. He was at all these meetings with these high political figures, and you just don't get invited to those type of meetings unless you're donating or there's some way involved financially that you end up there.
And all those people, the Anthony Wieners and the Podestas and all those people and the weird ass paintings they had with the, the kids getting it's just, I mean, again, I'm a little bit over the top with my, we need to kill these people after a fair trial. But this is another situation. Like if you're found in possession of the paintings that these people have hanging up in their walls when they let people come over, and you saw this painting on their wall, they should be arrested, put on trial, and kill them, because you wouldn't. I mean, it's like satanic portraits of children being like groomed and
like I don't have paintings like that in my house, and and who went to visit him and didn't think, hey, that's kind of odd.
Yeah, well, it was Podesta that had all the weird paintings, but still, these are all in the same kind of network. Anyway, bizarre. Well, I want to shift gears now. Obviously, I think with the Bibb County stuff, the Epstein stuff, that's the most top of mind for me right now. I've been listening to a lot of the different podcasts with the Martyr Made guy. Oh, I can't even think of his name. Daryl Cooper going on with Tucker Carlson. That was extremely informative, very important interview, and they really go into all the details there. But you did a lot of other things. Specifically, we talked a lot about the drug cartels and taking down drug cartels. That was my world, right? Like, so that's where, I was on the other end of it. And that was one of the reasons that you and I kind of hit it off. But talk about, I want to try and figure out how to get the story to have a good arc to it, because I know the story and I want you to tell it in a way that it really hits. And so you working in federal and law enforcement, wiretapping phones, doing control buys or whatever, where you're putting these people in prison with tons of drugs and everything like that. The reason that was interesting to me is the story that you told me first, though, about your dad.
Right.
So talk about your childhood and how you grew up and how you came into the drug scene.
It's so interesting because when you're a kid, you don't know anything else other than your world, and I had a great upbringing, that my dad, as far as they took care of me, and my grandparents were my grandfather and grandmother, and they were amazing and stuff. And they actually lived right across the street. And then I had another grandfather that lived a few blocks over. So that was a good foundation for stability. But, my father was a good man, but, trouble followed him. He was just always in a situation where it just kind of had happened to him, but it was a crazy world that I grew up in because, back then my father was a drug dealer, and he was a drug smuggler. And there was times in our life that I can actually talk, and I I actually am proud of my upbringing because my upbringing made me the man that I am today. I mean, there was times in my life that if my dad was off at prison or something, that like one time we were on welfare, and I'm humbled to experience that because, that's part of something that makes you strive to be more successful and greater. I mean, I remember asking my mom to go to the store at like, say Kroger's closed at like 10 o'clock. I'd asked her to go at 9:30 because back then you had the Monopoly money. Monopoly money. You had to pay with that. So I didn't want any other families to see us have to pay with the welfare money, and then we'd have to go to the welfare office and get certain things that we had at you'd only get certain items because half the other stuff was garbage at the welfare center. You know, you could get the cheese, obviously, and then there was a couple other things you could get from the welfare department. But, there was times in my life like that. And then there was times where, obviously they were selling a lot and he was just involved in smuggling marijuana and stuff like that. I remember, funny story one time about my dad. I had a friend of mine that's, he's another undercover agent that I used to do. I don't look like it now, obviously, but I used to have long hair and do undercover. And me and a good friend of mine here in Alabama, we used to do a lot of drug deals together and high-end undercover operations. And I remember one time, because the government's cheap, sometimes we have to figure out ways to make the operation happen, even if it's, hey, having my friends stay at my house in order to get the deal accomplished. And my dad was living at the time, and this buddy of mine, he's got long hair down to here, and he's got a long beard. And my dad comes in there, and he goes, "Son, what do you do for a living?" And he goes, "I'm an undercover agent, Mr. Fermo." And he goes, "Damn, I'm glad I didn't meet you back in 1970. I'd have sold you or bought some dope from you." he goes, "You'd have put me in jail." He goes, "This isn't even right." He goes, "That should be illegal to look like you and set me up." And we laughed about that. But, my time as a kid growing up, it was, my early memories are through prison systems and stuff like that and going through. And it was just a crazy environment, but I thought that was normal. My dad loved to fight. He was a good fighter, actually. And I think I told that on one of the other shows that we did that he would go to the bar and he had a thing that if you were getting the better of him, he always carried a knife. You were getting stabbed. I mean, 100% it was coming. And he didn't have a problem stabbing somebody, with a knife. And that was the life he lived. And it kind of helped me, I think, as I went into law enforcement. I think there was a part of me that was kind of angry at that, as growing up, because I remember one time an officer stopped me. I was at a stop sign and I had a car. He comes up, he gets my driver's license. He looks at it. I tell this story a lot. He looks at my driver's license and he goes, "Oh, Angelo Fermo." He goes, "We know your dad." He goes, "As soon as you hit 18, we're going to put you in jail just like your dad." I mean, they had already labeled me as a kid of what I was going to do. I had situations where, I remember one time I asked a girl out and she's like, "Oh, I went and asked my parents." She said, "I couldn't go out with you because of your family and stuff." And I mean, and it hurts, because you're like, well, wow, you're acting like this, but, it makes you stronger, makes you better. I couldn't wait to get out of the town that I was in. And then, I remember they came and did my background. I was like, when the federal government hires you, I went to college. I worked myself through college and stuff. And I actually started out on a farm when I was like 14, chopping cotton. Most people don't even know what that is, but you have to go down the rows because the farmer doesn't pay to spread the field. So you have to go down there and clean out the weeds. And so I'd work through those in the summer. And then I got a job, went to college, worked my way through college, got student loans. And I remember I got on as a police officer there in Mississippi, but 9/11, I was already in the system when 9/11 happened. It just springboarded my application immediately. And I remember they came and did the background checks in my town, and I was nervous as wreck, because you're thinking, are they really going to hire me? And so my dad was out. He had just got his last out of jail, out of federal prison, out of his last time, and that was it. He's like, "I can't go back anymore." He goes, "It's changed in this." He told me these stories. It's like, it's changed in the system to where it's not like it was all the times before. He goes, "It's getting more dangerous in the prison systems where there are gangs divided," and he goes, "It's tough in there now." And but he did tell me, he goes, it helped me because when he went to federal prison, he said, "Here's how it works. Your file goes ahead of you." And he said, "So my file gets to the county jail before I go to the federal prison." And he goes, "As soon as I got there, I knew I was okay because in my file, I'd already served time in Leavenworth and I already served time in Parchman Penitentiary. And in Mississippi, Parchman is the toughest penitentiary. If you've done time there, you can survive anywhere." Yeah. And he's like, as soon as they saw that, they knew we're not messing with this guy, because he's got cred. And he goes, that helped me. do his thing. But he did tell me, he goes, when he got out that last time, he's like, I can't go back. And he got on the straight and narrow, and he was in his late 40s, early 50s, I think. And he ended up never getting in trouble again after that. And he would just tell me stories about his days and young, wild times. But the background investigator comes to my house, and I see them walk up and talk to each other. And I was thinking, here goes my career right here. I'm never getting out of this town. I'm never getting out of Mississippi. It's all going to die right here with this conversation.
So just to frame this up so that I understand what's going on here. So you're already a police officer and you're applying to join the
federal
FBI.
government. Well, I was applying to become a special agent with the U.S. Customs Service.
Which would so you're going into federal law enforcement.
Correct.
So you're already in law enforcement. You're applying to become a federal law enforcement officer. And the only thing that can stop you is if they find out who your dad is and you're running with your dad, essentially.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, this is it. I'm never leaving this state, because they do a thorough background in the federal government.
Yeah.
And back then, it was really tough to get on with the federal government. And I had been trying so hard to get on, and I see them talk. And this is something that really touched me. So my dad comes in, and I'm waiting at the door, nervous as can be, and I was like, hey, what did he say? And because they talked for a few seconds, and my dad goes, I just told him, I said, hey, give my son a job so he doesn't turn out like me. And I was like, I credit that conversation, because I think that guy was like, and he passed me. And then the rest is history. I got picked up and got sent to San Antonio, and I was blessed to be out there. I ended up in a great squad. I do think God plays his role in every aspect of your life. I mean, I was fortunate enough to end in a good drug squad out there that we did some amazing things. We had some fun times. I come back on and tell you how we tap phones and some of the stuff we did on that. I mean, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I met a gentleman in Laredo, Texas, that was from Baldwin County, Alabama, and he liked my work ethic. And he asked me, he said, hey, where are you trying to go to? And I said, I'm trying to get to Mississippi. I spent so much trying to get away from it, then I was trying to get back to it, as a federal agent. And he goes, I can't help you get to Mississippi, but I can take you to Alabama if you want to go with me. And he goes, in a couple of years, call me. And I did. I left, and it was hard for me, because when I was in San Antonio, I was at the top of my game, I thought, out there. I'm getting award after award. This is amazing. I mean, we're just rolling. I got all these informants. Everything's going good. And I felt like coming to Alabama, I was going to take a step back in my career, because not a step back. It's just, you're right there on the front lines of the cartels. I mean, every day drugs are flowing. Every day money's going south. I mean, your target environment is wide open. I mean, we would go to Lowe's. I mean, not Lowe's. We'd go sit at Sam's Club and wait for people to buy either money counter machines or the big rolls of wrap. And if they bought so much of them, then we'd follow them to their house and then go through their garbage to see if they had any drug paraphernalia stuff, and then get a warrant, hit the house, and you'd find drugs. I mean, it was like fish hunting over a baited field in Texas. And so this gentleman named Joe Bettner, he's like, hey, I'm about to go back to Alabama. If you want to come with me at some point, come on. And so I end up asking to go. I'll never forget, I go to my boss in Texas, and they're looking at it, and his wife really liked me because we just did a big takedown out there. And I'll never forget, the wife leaned over to me during the takedown, and she goes, they don't let people like you leave. You're going to be stuck here forever. And I was like, no, I'm doing a great job. I'm arresting a lot of people. And she's like, they don't let people like you go. So her husband moves to the main boss position out there. I go to her and I said, would you please help me go to Alabama? And she called her husband and she goes, hey, you need to let him go. And I'll never forget, he was a great guy, but he was very arrogant. I walk in his office and he goes, once I sign this, you can't ever come back. And I was like, I get it. And he signs it. He calls over to Alabama and he goes, y'all owe me a basket of fruit and some gifts, because he's one of my best guys that I'm sending to y'all. And he sends me to Alabama. I get here. By the grace of God, I get here, and you couldn't even make this story up. They had the very first undercover operation created in 1987 in Mobile, Alabama, that was still functioning when I showed up in 2007. And it was like a kid in a candy store. I had rolled in. Now, it was kind of dwindling down, but what was amazing was a majority of the people that started in 87 in the undercover operation, like you have undercover operations, and then you have another level. That is, we had airplanes. We had 18-wheelers. We had a warehouse. We had a building just like this. We came to work, but you'd go in the back room and we're working on law enforcement reports, but the front part of it looks like a fully functional building facility. We didn't sell anything. We didn't buy anything. But if you came by, you thought these guys are movers and shakers. We got forklifts and everything going out there. And we had access to offshore supply boats to go pick up cocaine out in the Gulf of Mexico. And I was like, oh, this is great. And my second and third level boss could sign off on all operations. And from there, it was just wide open into South America, Central America, Mexico, the Middle East. Greatest times of my life. Exposed to so much. And I could juggle both. I could go on a big operation where I'm operating in the Middle East or in the UK on an undercover operation, or then I'm back at home working an operation with the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office and stuff. So very blessed to experience that. We rolled with that for a good 6 or 7 years. And then at some point, I can't say where, they ended up moving the operation to another city because of manpower, because all those people had started retiring, and I was kind of one of the last ones here in Alabama that kind of was at the end of it. So great. It's a crazy story how it ended there. I know we're talking forever.
You're good.
Crazy story. Pablo Escobar had a pilot named Barry Seals. And again, this is stories that were told to me, so some of it will probably be a little off, but it's, the base foundation of it's there. There was an agent, a DEA agent at the time that was working, assigned to Barry Seals, who was the Pablo Escobar's drug pilot. That agent ends up leaving DEA and moving to South Alabama and starts working for the U.S. Customs Service at the time. Short time later, Ronald Reagan wants to take down Noriega. So if you ever watch the show American Made with Tom Cruise, it's, that's kind of it. So they put all these cameras on Barry's plane. They go down there, they get Noriega, Pablo, they get him loading up all this coke. Right away, the U.S. government puts it all over the news. Pablo realizes, oh, the snitch is Barry, let's kill him. So they kill Barry Seals. But what people don't realize is Barry Seals was not the only pilot. Barry had all his family members that were involved in it as well. Not all of them, but a lot of them were flying planes too. Well, this individual that had come to South Alabama was reading a law that Ronald Reagan had just passed on the war on drugs, creating undercover operations. And as an entrepreneur, he goes to D.C., convinces them to give him a bunch of money. He comes back to Alabama and sets up the very first undercover operation. And he starts handpicking certain people with that kind of skill level to want to work at those operations, because on those operations, you're trying to take down the largest entities within itself using informants. We never really used a lot of wiretapping until later on towards the end of my career. But early on, we just used high-level informants that we would get through embassies around the world, or other offices would call that couldn't tackle those things. And I was very fortunate. When I got here, I'd go to those guys to lunch with those old-timers that had been there, and I just asked them questions every day. How did y'all do this? And how did y'all take down this? And that, to me, gave me the foundation to move forward after a lot of them retired.
That's incredible.
Incredible story. Great things that came out of there. Like, I saved a lot of stuff. Like, I got one that, now this is before I came on, sometime in the 90s, but I was like, I got to have a copy of that. Greatest undercover thing, I thought, personally. They're moving cocaine for the Colombians. So we would take a boat down to the coast, off the coast of Colombia, and they would come out with a boat. And so they get close to each other, and they throw the lines, and they pull the cocaine across. But also the Colombians, they always like to take care of the Americans, so they would send whiskey and cigarettes. And this one deal, this guy has this camera, and I actually have the video to prove this and back this up. So they're videotaping. They had gotten word that the Colombians were going to send a baby tiger and a monkey. And so anyway, apparently the baby tiger bit one of the Colombians on the boat down there, and they shot it and killed it. So when they showed up for the exchange, the only thing they had left was this little monkey. And here, lo and behold, they're loading all the coke, and you see the little monkey on somebody's arm, and you can hear the guys on the videos like, is that a monkey? Well, to get from the coast of Alabama to off the coast of Colombia is like, it's a long several-day haul with a boat, so it's several days back. They got all this cocaine that they're bringing back to the United States to drop off to other cartel members. Well, this is back in the day when there was no Wi-Fi or internet. You get bored on a boat. So what they did was the agents, they didn't have anything else to do. They taught the monkey how to drink and smoke cigarettes. So the monkey smoking cigarettes. Well, as crazy as it sounds, the United States government will go nuts for bringing in livestock or any kind of animals to the United States. So they called D.C. and let them know they're coming on a boat with this monkey. And the government freaks out. They're like, oh my God, you know, all the guys get in trouble on the operation. My boss gets in trouble. Well, anyway, the monkey comes into shore. They got to do something with it, you know? And so I'm telling this story to an agent at the office around 2009. He had just moved in and he's like, oh my God, that monkey's still alive. And I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah, his wife was working at the Gulf Shores Zoo. And he sent me a picture, and here's this old monkey. He's all gray and stuff. And he's like, yeah, all the ladies at the zoos talk about this monkey that y'all picked up in Colombia back in the day. Me, I wanted to go down to the zoo because I was like, I need to go by and throw him a pack of smokes in the cell because
he lights him up.
He hasn't had one in years. But yeah, people call me all the time and ask me, they're like, can you send me a copy of the video for the monkey? And I was like, yeah, I got it. I'll send it to you. So
that's awesome. Well, man, I know we could sit here and tell stories for days, but we'll have to save it for
another day.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. We'll kind of get you coming back on, and you know, and I just love it. It's like there's things that's pertinent right now. The things that the most pertinent is, in the national level, is Epstein, and right now the biggest thing going on in the state is this Bibb County story, and so thought it was pertinent to bring you on and kind of talk about those things. So thank you so much for taking
Absolutely.
the time.
Thank you for having me. And I love telling stories. So
yeah.
We sit here all day.
I know. We almost did.
Thank you, brother.
Awesome. Angelo Fermo, thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that will wrap it up for this week. And as always, until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.